Generate is supporting my vision to improve the financial literacy of 100,000 Kiwis by sponsoring Keep the Change. Cheers, Generate. Head to generatekiwisaver.co.nz/change to find out more. Welcome back. You are listening to another episode of the Keep the Change podcast, and we've got a familiar and gorgeous looking face sitting across from me today, James Blair from Lighthouse Financial. You'll all be familiar with James now from the Checks and Balances podcast, which is also one of the top rated podcasts in the country when it comes to financial literacy. And of course, we've had a number of discussions and done workshops and webinars, but it's been a time since we've had a chat, mate.
It's been a while.
Yeah. What have you been up to?
I got an 18-month-old.
Wow.
Doing little kickers on the weekend.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what 18-month-old soccer is like?
They're already playing football at 18.
Yeah. It's chaos.
Wow.
So yeah, doing that.
That's
and then obviously there's this thing called a recession happening.
Yeah.
And there's a few people worried about their money. So funnily enough, financial plans are busier than ever.
For the people who maybe haven't bumped into you guys before, and maybe even us jamming on the podcast, do you want to just go very, very quickly what it is that you guys do so that people have got some context before we rip into today's topic?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So at Lighthouse, we have accountants, mortgage brokers, financial advisors, and insurance advisors. People come to us and go, I'm time poor, I earn like a decent income, but I feel like I'm not getting ahead. And pretty much we put a plan in place. So we set really good goals to go like, what are your short-term goals, which we'll talk a little bit about today? Where do you want to go long-term? And then just going, what are the logical steps to knock that out? A big piece is just around making sure that like you and your partner are on the same page when it comes to your goals. Actually, low-key, a bit of like marriage counseling on the side.
Yeah.
And going, okay, financial plan, you might feel good you have one, but a financial plan doesn't make you wealthy. You've got to take action. So we're very set on, okay, make sure that we've got the budget in order. We've got an investment strategy. We're paying down debt, God forbid, Luke. And then obviously we've got the mortgage brokers, the accountants to help implement everything.
All sides of it. Nice. So how long have you been doing financial advice for?
Over 10 years since,
Wow.
So I'm 32, became an advisor when I was, I think, 21. I was actually driving when I was a financial advisor, started at Westpac, was at Westpac for 10 years. I'd go and see these clients who had like millions of dollars, and don't worry, financial advice is far more accessible now. But back in those days, we'd go and drink a cup of tea before there were Zoom calls, and I'd park my shitty Honda Civic around the corner from their house, the 1996 Civic, and they're like, James, drive down the driveway. And I'm like, no, it's
we're
okay.
good.
I'll park around the corner. So yeah, over a decade.
Wow. That's actually a really good thing to touch on just quickly, I think, because it's so hard when you're in a role like that. I even remember as well, getting into building out Next Advisory, doing business advice and stuff, and you're sort of questioning yourself. I guess it's a little bit of that imposter syndrome of shit, what are they going to think of me driving this, that sort of thing. And I think that's part of also what drives people to then take on debt, to have the fancy looking car or whatever to show up in their life and, be important or make it line up with what people's expectations or perceptions of them may be.
Yeah, perception is the thing, right? You always want to like hurry up and get older, get more experience so you become that person. And then you talk about how everybody who's got the wealth, that's not actually what they want. They would sell it all tomorrow to be back in that position again and get to do the whole journey again. So not really caring as much on, turn up dressed at a certain level, look professional, but don't, you hear all this advice all the time being like, the best thing you can do when you're young is getting started. Live at home as long as you can. Save as much money as you can. Get a head start because time is your best advantage, and don't pour your income into crappy assets that, you're trying to impress somebody that actually doesn't really care what you're doing anyway.
Well, speaking of, mate, I've been getting DMs from younger people, and this is exciting because they're actually asking what they should be investing into. And obviously being a CA and not being one to provide financial advice, the first thing I say is I can't tell you that.
Yeah.
But I thought maybe we could have some fun and actually look at this from an angle of how to invest your first $10,000. Because some of these people have $1,000, some of them have $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. And I think full credit to them, because I think for my 20s, what I did was basically, how could I earn more? Then I could get more debt and I could buy more shit. So I wasn't really on the investing thing. I'm kind of like, nah, you do that later on in life and then it all just, it figures itself out. So it's cool to see younger people actually thinking about this earlier. But I think so many of them get themselves stuck because they're looking for the best thing to invest in. And I certainly am not the person to tell them what the best thing to invest in is.
Yeah. And I mean, so I talk to a lot of engineers, and engineers are the worst. They will run, scenario, model after model, going like, what is the perfect investment? And they'll go, well, there is this one, it meets 9 out of 10 of my criteria, but I'm actually not going to do this one because I think there might be a better option. So let's run another model, and then I'll go and talk to them a year's time and be like, did you go and do that thing? And they're like, nah. Wow. It all became overwhelming. So like the first thing I would say is, and probably like the best thing about the time we're in, right? Like, it's no better time to be easier time to be making money, to be educating yourself, to become more desirable to the market. But in some respects, there's almost too much information, right? And so it can become a little bit overwhelming in terms of where I put my money. And then you go to like the family barbecue, and you got your dad saying that rental properties worked well for him, and Uncle Bob's going, commercial properties, how I made my money. Then you got Auntie Beth who's going like, look at my sweet Korean EV startup on Sharesies that's made it sweet like 32 cents. And you're like, this is just like all way too much information, and you just end up doing nothing because you don't know what the right thing is to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get yourself stuck, and then you don't take any action. I mean, I'm horrific for returns, but I'm outstanding at action. So I will do so much, and then it basically diversifies and stops me from being all in on something. So I'll probably over-index to taking action too fast, but knowing that I can take a lot of it and that will protect me, because something or things will be going well and some things won't be, but on the average, I'll be going up and to the right.
Yeah. And I like to say, and please don't take this as what I've been playing about you, but in general, coming back to the engineer's analysis, some people are too smart for their own good. Yeah, I know a lot of smart people that aren't particularly wealthy because of the paralysis by analysis, and there's always a better option. Well, I know some pretty dumb people who, like, if they can roll a couple of brain cells together on that day, they're doing pretty well, and they're rich. And they're rich because they just keep doing stuff. And if you keep doing stuff in a certain manner for a long enough period of time, the outcome is determined. We know that if you just continue investing into shares in a diversified way, if you buy and hold property for long enough periods of time, if you keep to a good budget over a long enough period of time, if you continue to invest into your skill set and become more desirable in the marketplace, probably going to work out pretty well for you. The other thing but people just go like, we're in a recession. Now's not a good time to buy a house because like interest rates are high, or the share market's gone up too much, so I'm going to wait for a crash before I invest. And we all like to think that this particular point in time is somewhat special or unique, but it ain't. There's a recession, there's a boom, there's a recession, there's a boom. It will happen until we just like run into the sun one day and all blow up. Like, markets are cyclical, right? That's just how it rolls.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I hear a lot is now a good time to invest? And I'm like, oh man, you're asking the wrong question. And I get it. Like, if you're watching that thinking, okay, you ask that, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it is the share market, whether it's property, everyone's always looking for, is now the right time to invest? But the only way you can know that is with hindsight, because what you're actually asking is, am I going to regret this? Is it going to go up? Is this going to be a good decision? And when you randomly ask a stranger on the internet, like, you should just stop and go, is that a good idea to ask a random stranger who doesn't know me or anything about me or my situation or my goals, if now is a good time to invest and insert any asset type?
Yeah.
But people do it all the time. Too many of us signed up to a KiwiSaver plan without much thought. And signing up is great, but if you've never got advice before, you could be missing out. Your KiwiSaver account could become one of your biggest assets over your lifetime. That's why getting expert advice early and ensuring you're in the right fund is so worthwhile. Generate have a team of KiwiSaver advisors available to help. Head to generatekiwisaver.co.nz/change to book a no obligation meeting. They can even come to you. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
It is crazy people getting advice from others on the internet about their money. My wife is a member of the Mum Hub on Facebook, and they like ask, should I sell my house? And people are like, I've sold my house and my life is never better, and I got a spa, and like, should I invest into these shares? And you're like, who is qualified to be doing these?
Yeah. I think, what's the stock that's going nuts at the moment? Is it Nvidia? Is that the one? Yeah. Like the amount of people who have told me, oh, you should have been investing into that. Oh, mate, like here's my screenshot. And it's like, yeah, cool. Like there's always going to be one of those. And I think that's what we're attracted to on social media and stuff. We see that stuff. And I wonder if part of, for younger people getting on TikTok, seeing these viral reels and these insights to, you know, if you put $100 into Nvidia 3 years ago or whatever, and so then you think, oh, is now the time to get in, or have I like missed it? And I think I used to be a bit like that and impressionable and kind of think, right, I want to play in that space too, and I want to get a return and get something for nothing. But eventually you realize that could come down, it could pop, or you miss the next one as well. And then you're back into that cycle of, oh, like, how did I miss that one? And so you're constantly just chasing.
It's lazy. It's lazy. What it is going, I want that thing that's going to be like winning the lotto, right? I want to get this like huge lucky return without putting in any of the effort to achieve the outcome. I actually heard, I'm a huge fan of Alex Hormonzi. I don't know if you're familiar with some of his stuff, but he talked about like say winning the lottery, right? There's, I think, 7 people out there that have gone and won $50 million between them, and good luck to them, because it's statistically very hard to keep the money once you've won it. Yeah. Because if you didn't have the skills to build the money, being given the money, it's like being a trust fund kid, right? Like, retaining that cash is super, super hard. But it's almost like he talked about how it's borderline a curse to have that, instant, winning of money, because you didn't get to become the person to grow that wealth. And I think that's I'm fortunate as a financial advisor. I get to talk to some super cool people who've like just gone and like done really interesting stuff, from like Ialoo, who created like a marketing business selling clothes on the internet with the Kardashians, to somebody like Naomi Ballantyne, who founded Partners Life, and these people just going out there and just building these things. Yeah. And that's the cool bit, is being able to become that person to create that wealth.
Yeah, love that. On that with Lotto, I asked people leading up to that $50 million draw on Instagram, what would you do? And everyone's got their answer of what they'd do. But from what I observed, 95% of people, basically their answer was spend it. And in their mind, I'm sure that's not what they're thinking, but they would say, I'll pay off this person's debt, I give some away. But most people had a way that they would spend it. Barely anyone is like, I could invest the 50 million at 5% and live off that amount of money after tax in a term deposit and buy myself some time to then figure out what I'm going to do and have 10 times the amount of money I currently do at the moment. So you could almost, no one was basically thinking about wealth preservation. Everyone's just straight into, okay, like I know how I'd get rid of it. Yeah. And I think that's because that's what we do in society, is we teach everyone how to spend.
Well, how many of those people, like, let alone have had $50 million to invest before, have had like $10,000? I saw you put up that thing today about how many Kiwis had like $500 available if an emergency came up. And I think was it a third of Kiwis didn't even have $500?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people just don't have money. So to go in this hypothetical situation where you had all this cash, what would you do? It doesn't surprise me at all that a lot would make the wrong decision.
Yeah. I guess that brings us to a good point there. Let's go to fundamentals. So say we are younger, or even just say we're going to invest our first, $1,000 or $10,000. What would you suggest is that first thing to be thinking of or about?
So before talking, so there's probably 2 key starting points. One is around some principles around money, but I'd probably start with goals first.
Nice.
Because what should you do with the money is dependent on what you want to do. Money is just a tool, and I think I've stolen this line off you, and I tell pretty much every client, so if it is, thank you. Money's just a tool to help you live the life you want to live, right? Yeah. That's all money is there for, to look after you and to look after the people you care about, give you security. That's essentially all it is. So what do you want your money to do for you is probably where I would start. What are your shorter term goals within the next 12 months? Because if you've got goals within the next 3 years, you should be keeping it in cash or term deposits, because people do put their the deposit for the house in Bitcoin, but that's a very, very bad idea. Versus if you've got longer term goals, maybe you've got like a 10-year horizon, or you're trying to, you should be maybe looking at a longer term asset. So you've really got to start with what are your goals first. And then if you've got a spouse or a significant other, getting on the same page, because a lot of people break up over money. And it's because you don't have alignment when it comes to your goals.
Yeah. I'd written down here, mate, the TikTok videos never talk about goals or why, as that's not clickbaity.
It's boring.
Yeah, but you can make a viral video basically saying, I turned $100 into 1,000 on the share market and here's how I did it. And everyone's going to be like, fucking hell, show me that. But if you said, all right, I had a goal, and you're like, that's boring. But everybody's goals are different. So yeah, I'd echo that as well. Think about what it is that you're doing. And, for me, I used to think like, okay, what can I invest this money into? What I learned about myself is I couldn't hold on to it. And I would get to a ceiling and then I would start to eat into it again. I would be the person who's won the lotto and I'm like, oh shit, I got 10 grand sitting there. So I'd see it sitting there. And so then I knew, okay, something has to change, because my goal was, I wanted to try and save 100 grand, let's say. So who I was, like you said before, couldn't do that. So I had to become somebody else. So so my answer to myself was, okay, I can't trust myself. I'm going to pass it over to my sister. And I'm going to try and become the person who can stack $100,000. So that was my goal. And I didn't care about if I missed zero going up or if I missed A2 milk swinging again or whatever. I'm basically just thinking, no, I want to become the person who can stack 100 G's. Then I know I can do it.
Yeah. And that is talking about controlling your environment, right?
Yeah.
And controlling your environment with your money is super important, because you have to set up like the systems to give yourself the highest probability for success. And it's the exact same thing, like when it comes to like diet and weight loss and all those sort of things, is if I'm driving home, right, I know there's a way I can drive home where I can go past like a dairy, get something on the way home, go home, watch a show with my wife and do that. Or I can drive another way home where there's no temptations, so don't even need to think about it.
Yeah, nice.
And it's the exact same thing with your sister in terms of giving her the money. You don't even have to think about it because you've controlled your environment well enough.
Yeah. So I think you've got to know like why you're doing it, why you're investing the money. Before you even ask that question to someone on the internet, what should I invest into? Why are you trying to invest or save? What is it going towards?
Yeah, because the other interesting thing about, when you put on the internet, what should I invest into? There's never the question back, what are your goals?
Yeah. And you get 20 different opinions of like, here's what I do, and then you're stuck again.
Yeah.
But if you've just asked one person in the DMs, then you're going to just get one person's idea of what could be good. So I think you have to be so careful with it. But this is, I guess, the confronting piece is that, say you've got $1,000, like even if you get a 10% return on that for the first year, it's $1,100. Is the $100 going to change your life?
Not at all.
If you have $10,000 to invest and you turn that into $11,000 after a year, you got a 10% return. Because people tell me all the time, where are you going to get a 7% return? So let's just be a little bit brave and aim for a 10. You turn that $10,000 into 11. Is that $1,000 going to change your life?
A little bit more, but not really.
Now you become someone who's got a free emergency fund, maybe, because you've got $500 for that emergency, so you can tick the box in Kiwi Bank's next survey when they survey 1,000 Kiwis and ask, do you have $500 sitting there in an emergency? And you kind of go, well, I haven't had to do anything for that. But say you put it into a term deposit, to get a 10% return, well, you probably can't because the rate's not high enough. Then you're still going to have to pay tax on that too. But maybe you put it into the share market, that increases, you get a capital gain, you've got the money sitting there, so you've got your 11 grand. But I'd suggest that in a year, for someone to be given $1,000 for free, at the end of that year, they'd probably still go, my life's not that much different. So be realistic about what it was. And I think that's what I did when I realized it wasn't working for me to chase the next thing, and I might put $5 grand into it, or put $1,000 in here, or my mate said this and whatnot. And it's all exciting that we can do all of this fractional investing now. But I realized like maybe I need to get 100K, and then if I can turn that into 110,000, man, 10 grand, like now I'm feeling something. So, and that everybody's going to have their different feeling around that or what that means to them. But I think we kind of get a bit of cash and just assume that we can go all in on something or invest it, and then all of a sudden our life's going to be completely different. But we still have to practice becoming the person that's going to keep doing it.
Yeah. And it's like the saying around the first $1 million you make is bloody hard to make. The second million is inevitable. And it's the same, you go, oh, $1 million, $2 million, you apply it to $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, all the same principles apply, that it's that point you have to push through is the hard bit. And the problem we have is, essentially as glorified monkeys, is we're not good at delayed gratification. We're not built for delayed gratification. We want things immediately, and our whole environment is, all the marketing we get is all designed for us to spend our money, to stimulate the economy, to get things going, to create more jobs, to this person's got a nicer house, this person's got a nicer car, this person's going on holiday, whatever it might be. All money going away, right? Money going away. And we've got lots of examples with our client base where people earn really good money, but they spend it all. Yeah. And that's just like the treadmill of life, and you are just going nowhere. And so that delayed gratification, that consistency over time, that set and forget boring approach, that is what actually creates real wealth. Yeah.
It's funny because we aren't good at delaying gratification, and then we encourage people to spend more than they have by saying, right, you can have a credit card, you can have buy now, pay later, so I don't want you to blow a gasket, read credit cards, but 2.5 million I think we've got in the country. Like, why do we even need them if we're so good at finances? Like, people could have a good conversation with themselves and go, do I really need this? Or why do 2.5 million of them exist?
It's marketing. Like, that's the answer, right? It's just all marketing. Like, I had somebody who had a $20,000 credit card and we worked together to pay it off. And then I was like, cut it up. And he was like, but I've worked my way up to like a world card and I get points and access to a lounge. And I'm like, man, it's all crap. Like, if you want access to a lounge and you've got the money to pay for it and it gives you value, whatever, but this is a trap. And the people that go, I never miss my any of my credit card payments. I've spoken to a lot of those people, and when I look at their numbers, a lot of them do miss a payment. Yeah. And it's just around going, we know that like 1 in 7 Gen Zs with a credit card, it's maxed out. We know that, I don't know, like when you were at uni, but like banks go have an overdraft, have like a $500 credit card. They're building that stuff into you at such an early age. So I think credit cards are just really smart marketing from the banks.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we become tribal. We defend it. Like, people will go out of their way to argue why it's a good idea, and that's fine if that's your thing. But I think, like you boys said on your podcast, you are not everyone. So don't think that just because it's perfect for you, that everybody's going to be the exact same perfect student where they never pay interest and all of this shit. But also, once I accepted that was still small thinking, I moved to, well, why don't you pay for your own travel insurance so that you don't have to have a credit card to do that? Why don't you earn so much money that you don't care about the air points, about the hot points and all that stuff? And then throughout that journey, because that's the person I decided to try and become, I realized, Westpac have a debit card that has air points attached to it. Why does no one talk about this? And when you tell people with a credit card about that, they're like, oh yeah, but with my one, I get, one anal bleaching from Amex a year or something. You don't understand. That saves me $600. Oh, fuck. Okay.
To be fair, that is handy. I 100% agree. And the other thing is just going, okay, do you think the bank is losing money on these products?
That's my favorite.
Do you think that they've got, what are the banks making billions of dollars a year? Do you reckon they're doing something that's a charity case going, you know what, James over here, he's worked hard all year. He deserves to save up those points to go on a holiday to Fiji. Nah, they're making money.
Yeah. Someone's paying the bill somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to come to KiwiSaver. Because if I were younger, and this ties in with delayed gratification, because I know there's a lot of people who don't like KiwiSaver. Oh, it's a shit product. Oh, you can't touch it till you're 65 or you're buying a home. There's no flexibility to it, etc., etc., etc. Probably because it directly conflicts with, our inability to delay gratification. So we're looking at it going, I can't get that till I'm 65. That's the whole fucking point.
You can't be trusted.
Yeah. So if I'm younger, I'm thinking, instead of thinking, okay, where can I put this $1,000 to hopefully get a 10% return or whatever, I'm looking at KiwiSaver and going, do I do that? Because my employer is going to give me 100% of my 3%. So now I've just doubled my investment. And the government are going to give me $500, $521, let's say, of my tax back because I've contributed $1,043. Now, going back to what we were talking about before, if you know that you're then going to use that money for a property, for instance, then you have just found a great investment because you can get 100% return by your employer kicking in. The government are going to give you some of your tax back as well. And then you're going to pull that out to buy your first home if that's what you decide to do. And hopefully the rules don't change as such. And hey, maybe they do, but there would be hell on, I think, if they changed the rules around that.
Yeah, I don't think any political party's ever going to do that.
Yeah. So that, for me, that seems like a smarter path. It's boring, but okay, I'm going to get a guaranteed return from my employer plus the government if I invest over there.
Yeah. And while it may be a bit boring, let's look at this, right? You're making 100% return on your money. You are putting in 3% of your income. The government, your employer is going to match that minimum. Some might have better employers that are doing more than that, but that's the minimum.
True.
And then on top of that, you're getting $500 a year. So you're making more than 100% return on your money. There is no investment. So if you're 20 to 65 over 45 years, that is going to per annum do 100% a year. Plus, then in addition, the growth of maybe if you're in a growth fund, 10% on average over the long term. The compounding math on that is just madness opposed to I want my extra 3% so I can then just go and blow it on a couple of years on the weekend. And you're not going to miss 3% of your income.
Yeah, I guess that's the danger of doing it yourself too, is that you turn your $1,000 into $1,100. At the end of the year, it's so tempting to be like, okay, well, right, I'm going to get 2 espresso martinis and boomfa, you've got through half your $100, probably even a bit more these days. And so you haven't really gained too much. I do it's good though that people are thinking about this, but yeah, I would suggest to stop looking for the shiny lights and go back to how did I stack this 1,000 or this 10,000? How can I do that again, but in half the time? That I think is a better challenge than where can I invest this?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's some in addition to the goals, some good principles around money to touch on. So the first one is any form of high interest debt or the potential that it becomes high interest debt, like a higher purchase at 0% that's going to go into a higher rate.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. If we've got any of those things in our closet, we want to knock those out, because if you've got a credit card at 20%, the return you would have to make on an investment once you factor in tax, fees, and inflation is probably 30% a year. So really focusing on knocking out those debts that you have is where I would start. And then you alluded to it before as well, but around emergency funds. So you've just got to have some cash sitting available. We say 3 to 6 months expenses. At a starting point, it might even be less, just so you've got to repair your car, your laptop, brakes, whatever, that you've got some money. Because if you don't have an emergency fund, what's going to happen? You're going to go get that credit card. You're going to go use the overdraft because you're not going to have another option. But if you've got the emergency fund, that's what it's there for.
And then you're in that game of trying to pay the credit card off. So then you aren't thinking about investing again. Okay, so what you're saying is, instead of getting cute, this is the way I like to explain it, make the cash before getting cute, basically. So if you can pay down some high interest debt, you're going to stop yourself having to earn even more to pay off that interest. So perhaps focus on clearing that down to start with.
100%. There's no investment that will make a better return than that, unless one thing, which you did allude to, is how did you make the money? So if you made saved $1,000 or $10,000, and if really, I guess wherever you are in your career, but particularly if you're earlier in your career, how can you reinvest back into your skill set? How can you become more desirable to the marketplace? So you can go from earning $80,000 a year to $100,000 a year to, in 5 years' time, $200,000 a year. Yeah. That's the other really, we talk crypto, we talk bonds, we talk term deposits and property and shares, but a lot of people just stop thinking about what is your greatest wealth creation tool. It's your income. And if we can get that income higher, that's going to accelerate this thing a hell of a lot faster. Because I have people that come and talk to me on modest incomes, and I'd like to do something magical, but if I don't have a difference between your income and your expenses, even if your expenses are moderate but your income's not that high, it's very hard to get financial freedom. So how can you invest into yourself to make yourself more desirable to the market, get your income up, have more disposable income to then pour it into those assets that will pay you back in income, so you don't have to do the income generating anymore.
Love that, mate. Love that. It just reminds me of an example today where someone commented on one of my Instagram posts saying, hard luck about what I'd invested into in New Zealand companies or something like that. And it's not really hard luck because I knew that the New Zealand economy was going that way. So I knew what was coming, but I didn't take it out because I'm investing rather than trying to catch the right timing. Anyway, I asked them, what do you invest into?
Give me your advice.
Yeah. But they listed out I trade was their word, not invest. I trade. And they listed out these things that I'd never even heard of before. And I replied and said, good for you. I trade business skills and invest the money that I earn after paying tax. And that's what I do. Because years ago, I would try and figure out how can I make a quick dollar. Then I realized, okay, no, I want to be rich. I want to figure out how to make more money and have more money. I need to do that bit. And it's probably not going to be the day trading stuff. I'm not cut out for that shit. So business was a way that I could do it. So then I focused on increasing my income. I then pay my tax. I then have the after amount. I stacked my first $100,000. Then I knew I could do that. And no one was standing there going like, fuck, mate, you did it. Congratulations, celebrating. If anything, all that happens is you start then realizing like, $100,000 actually isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I need to go again. So then I had to double down on my skills to figure out, okay, how can I earn money faster? And then how can I stay disciplined and keep stacking and not spend that money. But at one stage I had nothing. I had a zero and I had credit card debt. So I had to get out of that as well, start with zero, and then look at my goal being $100,000 and know that it was going to take hard work and becoming more valuable to the market. And I was always going to be tempted along that journey from 0 to 100 of maybe I could put a little bit into there over there because I know a little bit and my mate said that this could work out.
It's a sure thing.
Yeah, but I keep ignoring and like, no, the goal is to stack the 100 Gs and then go from there.
Yeah,
so,
it's interesting what you say about like $100,000 not being that much money. Like it's a lot of money, but it's not that much money. And I also, the example of you had no money and you had debt versus having $100,000 over here, probably like the environment in which you're in, I'm guessing, was quite different as well in terms of the people that you surrounded yourself with there versus the people you surrounded with there. And then as you develop your skill set, as you grow your wealth, you get exposed to different people doing interesting things. And then like your perception on not just money, because once again, money is just a tool to help you live your life. Like your perception on life changes as well, right? So it almost opens different doors and gives you a different look on things.
Yeah. And, when I did start getting closer to that $100,000, I then saw a concept of you need to try and get a 20% return every year. And instead of doing the whole like, where are you going to get 20%? I was thinking, holy shit. Okay. And then I watched the math of what happens if you do that. And that then got me thinking about, okay, who can I hang around or what rooms can I get in where maybe that's what they're doing? And part of it for me was realizing, okay, I can store that cash, but then I can also go and put some of it to work, but then continue to increase my income. And maybe I don't need 20% because my income's increasing as well. So then that's going to offset the fact that my investment return rate might not be 20%. But it just, like you said before, it got me thinking in a completely different way rather than jumping back on social media, seeing what things people were talking about and what's the next Nvidia or bloody boom AI stock that I could be getting involved in or crypto coin.
Mate, you could take that $100,000, get a $200,000 car loan and buy a sweet Lambo. How's that for some financial advice for you?
Right, I'm out of here. Let's go do that. I think the other thing as well that I've noticed is as the KiwiSaver fund providers have become more mature, they've obviously heard the demand from people saying, I want to invest as well. And so they've built the same funds outside of KiwiSaver so that if you are the person that's like, I don't want to tie it up in KiwiSaver, they allow you to do that too. And it's almost like with investing now in New Zealand, we didn't, like people weren't at the bowling lane. Then we got everyone to the bowling lane and we said to them, hey guys, we're going to even put the guardrails up for you. You just need to stand here and throw a ball down. You might not get a strike, but you're going to hit a pin. And people are still standing there being like, fuck, I don't know about that, man. I'm going to hold on to my ball.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold this. I'm not sure. This seems a little bit too good to be true. And the content and education that's now available, and basically some of these platforms as well, been like, hey, we can hold your hand through the whole process, and people are still like, nah, I'd rather hold on to my bowling ball. Is bloody confusing.
Yeah. I do think that's a really good point. Like with KiwiSaver, you don't want to contribute any more than whatever your employer is contributing, for the pure fact that it is just locked up and you have less options. Like, say you want to buy because you want to start a trade, or you want to start your own business, or you want to do an OE, all those things become unavailable.
It's just on that. You may do that, and there will be people that do that, listening to that, being like, oh, what the hell do you mean, James? What you're saying is basically it doesn't make financial sense to, you're not going to be financially incentivized by someone to do that, right?
Correct.
So, yeah, your best financial return would not be to continue to do that, unless it protects you from yourself in the future.
Yeah, but the only problem, once again, with that is once you develop those skills, that money is still locked up and you have less flexibility and less options. So your point around having an unlocked version of KiwiSaver, which is the exact bloody same thing, except it's not called KiwiSaver, it's called a managed fund. And funnily enough, a KiwiSaver is a managed fund. You've got flexibility to invest the money, make the same returns, but not have it locked up. A really perfect example that I run into every single day is parents setting up KiwiSavers for the kids. And I'm like, you get no government tax credit. Like there's no, unless we're doing like some slave work for the kids or something, there's no employer contributions or anything like that. You're way better to put that money. And who knows what's going to, podcast for another day, what's going to happen to the property market when my son wants to buy a house. I think far higher percentage of the population is going to be renting, and he might not even want to buy a house. So setting up some structure where you are contributing the money, you are growing their wealth, you are giving them a head start, but it's not locked up for either retirement, hardship, or buying your first home.
Yeah, so basically there's funds now that give you the same exposure, but you've then got the flexibility.
Yep.
Yeah. And even the age-old classic, like how many videos have been made now from people saying just dollar cost average into the S&P 500? And if you just go and research that for an hour, dollar cost average into the S&P 500, you will learn a lot of people's investment strategy, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's very, very simple. And for a lot of people, you don't need to complicate it much more, certainly when we're talking about $1,000 or $10,000. And that's the great thing about where we are now with these, DIY platforms, opposed to, I'm sure, you remember like pre-Sharesies 10, 15 years ago, you'd have to go talk to like a broker and they would not want to talk to you. They would charge you high fees. There was no flexibility, but there's a lot more options now.
Yeah. I was having a look, mate, the other day, and I made my first share purchase in 2007, I think it was. And I think I was 17. So I think I had to have mum's co-signature on it. But the fees, I think, were like $40 on $5,000 or something. And then the GFC hit. And I'm like, fuck this, man. Sold them. Paid another $40 in fees to get the money out.
Yeah.
So did my ass on the share going down in the GFC and then losing $80 to expenses as well.
That's why the broking houses have such nice offices.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to to come to the point around what should you do with the money once you've got the goals and the good fundamentals, investing into shares is a good option if you do not need to use the money. God, like if we're talking about like purely investing into 100% growth assets, and growth assets are shares and property, and we're talking funds for property right now, you should be having a time horizon of like 7 years plus to make sure that, and this is all based on, do we have a high degree of probability that you'll end up with more money and get the expected outcome? If you invest into shares for a year, anything can happen. We know like over the last 50 years, the average return of the S&P 500 is 10.9%, that there's been, I think, 18 years with a 20% or more gain and 3 years with a 20% or more loss, right? So statistically, there's some probability on your side, but if you need that money to go and do something, it might not be there when you need it in a year's time. But if you can go through the whole cycle, that's a really good option. If you need the money a little bit shorter term, but maybe it's more like 5 years. Once again, looking at, KiwiSaver providers, Kernel Wealth is another really good option where they've got more like balanced risk investments. So maybe half of it's in cash and bonds, which are more low risk assets, half is in shares and property. And that has a time frame more like 5 years. And then if we're talking anything less than 3 years, you should be leaving it in term deposits or cash. Term deposits, The main downside is around that it is locked up, so you cannot get the money out unless you get some mad penalties by taking the money back out. The downside of leaving money in cash and term deposits is inflation. So people are going 6%, pretty sweet return. Inflation right now 4%, was it 7%? Once you factor in tax, term deposits and cash are the only investment where you are guaranteed to lose money long term, assuming you're in something diversified. So unless you can't tolerate any volatility, if your money is for the long term, it really shouldn't be sitting into cash, because you have to save so much more money to outstrip, like that example of 10,000 turning into 11,000, turning into 12,000. You have to save so much more money if you leave your money in cash in the bank.
Yeah, a lot of the fund providers as well these days are outside of the bank, and I think even some of the banks do. They have cash type funds where it's not locked into a term, right? So you might get the flexibility where you can touch it if you need to, but a higher rate than what the traditional banks may be offering.
Yeah, that's a really good shout. There's quite a few different providers. I know Kernel has a cash fund that's pretty good. My only comment with those cash funds is just making sure like you understand actually where the money is getting invested. Like had a few people ask me about like the Squirrel fund savings account, and I'm like, I actually don't know where that money is going. It might be just in bank term deposits and government bonds or something, but just look into it before you do anything. Yeah,
that's the other thing I get is people say, hey, what are your thoughts around this? I'm like, I haven't had any thoughts on this. Oh, that's my favorite answer at the moment. Yeah. It's like, I haven't had any thoughts about that. Or they'll say like, here's my situation. What are your thoughts? I'm like, I've never had any thoughts about your situation. Yeah. I'm like, what are your thoughts about it? Yeah. And then they've got to articulate, what are you actually trying to ask? But yeah,
that's where you say, talk to James.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I can't give you that advice. Yeah. But there's so many of these options now, I think, as well, that people are like, oh, maybe I'll put my $1,000 in that. Maybe I'll put it in that. And you're stuck again. Yeah. Because now you're back, like you're down into the different types of cash funds. Which is the best one? Is it this brand? Is it that brand? Oh, these guys have just released one as well. And then you're stuck and you're still not doing anything. So to sort of summarize, mate, I think if you have less than $10,000 to invest, know this, that even when you get to 100,000, it's still going to be hard because you're thinking about your first 10,000 or 1,000. But I had someone reach out to me recently who stacked 100,000, and guess what questions they had? All of the same questions, like, what do you think I should do now? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know you. I don't know what your goals are. And then they started telling me, like, I'm not sure if I want to buy a house anymore. This is why I was stacking it. And I'm like, I can't make your life decisions for you. But they added 1 0 to the end, and they're in the exact same position. They still didn't know where to go to next.
I would actually say it probably gets more confusing because now you've got more options, right? You got $10,000, you're not buying property. You got $100,000, you've got a deposit for depending where you're living in the country, 10 or 20%. So now we've got a completely different asset class that we've got available. And if we fast forward to say I've got $1 million, then commercial property becomes an option as well, right? And it's more money, more problems. Yeah. And it's just more options become available. But that's the other bit around compounding returns and building wealth, right, is by stacking money, starting with the most simple strategy you can possibly can, more options become available to you. Then, I mean, I'm sure the listeners, they've had scenarios in their life where, somebody came to me at some point being like, do you want to invest into this thing? Or do you want to buy this property? Or now we know like property, is down like 20% in parts of the country at the moment. But because we haven't done the work in the years beforehand, we're not in a situation where we can take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think instead of getting obsessed with the best fund provider, the best looking color, who's got the best pastel color this week, and have you heard about this startup and they're doing this, and all of these different things you're seeing, focus when you're sitting on less than 10 grand, still focus on habits, practices, skills, increasing your own value and yourself. And then keep stacking the cash, and then you'll start to figure it out. Because if I think back to my journey of 0 to 100 grand, if I were to do it again, I probably would, because I carved off a percentage of my income and just pushed it straight out to my sister to become the person who could stack 100 grand. Doing it differently now, I would probably just go right straight into some sort of fund, knowing that I'm probably going to be investing long term. But I didn't know that when I was going 0 to 100. So I didn't know if I could trust myself. So then I put the guardrails up. And B, I didn't even really know what I was going to do once I got to the 100. I just wanted to figure out, could I do it? But now, with hindsight, which I think is the other really important piece, is everyone will give you what you should have done with hindsight. But now I can look back and go, that was now maybe 4 years ago. I probably should have just keep pumping into a fund because I'm outside of the 3-year window of needing it and I'm still not really there. So I probably should have just put it into some fund and got a better return rather than bank accounts and protecting me from being able to touch it. But that's easy with hindsight. I don't know if at month 9, I'm at 60 grand, say, I'm like, man, I'm going to roll 30 grand. It's only half of it. I'll survive if I lose half of it. I'm going to roll that into Ethereum. And then the next day it tanks. And I'm like, oh my God. And then it completely derails me thinking that I can become the person who stacks 100 grand. The world's against me. Fuck this, man. This is bullshit. There's no point. So focus on stacking habits, practices, skills yourself. You'll earn more money. You can then deploy more of that. You will then figure it out as you go. Then you can access people like your KiwiSaver provider who you might be able to ask for advice. You can come to people like yourself and say, hey, I think I'm at a stage now where I need your help. And there will be people there to help you.
Yeah, and the best investing strategies are the most boring. Like the no shot at the person who was telling you about all their sweet trading strategies. I'm guessing they're probably poor. And maybe that's like an unpopular thing to say, but like you build a skill set and then you deploy it consistently over a long enough period of time to a boring strategy. You should not be, and this, please, do not pick direct stocks. I know you got some direct stocks, Luke.
Should we pull them up?
Yeah, I know that. I know that some of them haven't been going well, and there's good reason like why some of them haven't been going well. Maybe long enough time goes by, but I mean, you talked about the S&P 500. Diversified, low-cost solutions is what's going to work well over the long term. Do not think you can outperform the market because, like, how much time are you going to have to pour into? Sometimes I hear people going, oh, let's like analyze like financials for business. Nah, unless you want to be that person, don't think you have to become that person. Just diversified, consistent drip feeding, dollar cost averaging over time. It'll look after you.
Yeah, nice. And I think as well, it's very easy when the American market has been going really well for people to then log in and see like, oh, wow, because they've set and forget, a year ago, like, oh, wow, I'm up like 15% this year, but they haven't really known how that's happened. But they will tell somebody who hasn't invested into America, for instance, like, oh, all you had to do was put your money into the American stocks. And it's like, yeah, again, that's hindsight.
Yeah.
So ignore all of that stuff if you are in that less than 10K piece and it's all just noise and you've got to focus on stacking and you will figure the rest out and go and seek the education as you grow that pot of cash.
Nice.
Done. Just like that, mate. Good to bloody connect back in. What do we 45 minutes here, 46. If people need to reach out to you guys and get some help or think they're at the stage where they need to put a financial plan together, how do they get in touch with you, mate?
Yeah, lighthousefinancial.co.nz. Checks and balances. I've got like over 200 episodes, trying every day to get a little bit better and get a little bit closer to Luke's quality. And also check us out on Instagram for your favorite finance memes.
The one thing I forgot to mention, mate, that I think is really important, especially for younger people, and because I've studied a lot of old literature now around money, and some of these things will be over 100 years old. And the theme in there is always like build, create, and produce. If you can become one of those people that builds something, creates something, or produces something, you'll probably end up with more money than most people. And I kind of think, shit, that information has been around for ages.
Yeah.
But it's hard for people to put into practice. But when you're younger, I think you can stay at home. You can then, which then stops your bleed of cash being paying for your living if your parents will look after you. So you've got one of the biggest expenses for most households that isn't an issue for you. You can take some risk to figure out what can you build, create, or produce. And it doesn't need to be, you're building the next Zuru, but look what happens if you do. It doesn't need to be building the next Between Two Beers or Keep the Change podcast or whatever. What can you do that allows you to become a builder, a creator, or a producer? Because those people seem to be the people that from even 100 years ago talk about having more money and they achieve it.
Yeah. And even with AI, like the fundamentals are still the same. We're still people and all of those things still apply. And it's just crazy that you'll invest all of this time, listening to podcasts, educating yourself, and you won't have a plan for your career or a plan for how you're gonna create wealth. And like, it's pretty bloody straightforward, right? Like if you're in a salaried role, you go to your boss. I want to create a plan to earn this level of income. Tell me what I need to do to be able to do it. And you just go and do it, and you do twice as much. And then you turn around and go, look what I've done. And even if they turn around and go, I'm not doing it, what a track record you've got to go out and do something else. Then you've got more cash, pop it into funds, pop it into property, keep away from debt. You're going to be good.
Love it, mate. I think as well, we should just mention that a couple of times throughout this, I guess we've kind of made it sound like $1,000 or $10,000 or even $100,000 isn't a lot of money. And there'll be some people that are like, that is a fucking lot of money. I would love to have that. And I think that, reminds us that not to compare, because everybody's at a different stage. So whether you have 0, you're at -100, -1,000, everybody's running a different race and they've got a different start line and they will have a different finish line. So think about what you can do, and remember too that 40% of KiwiSaver balances are less than 10 grand. So It's not like we're this nation of people that have just got shitloads of money. So even if you can get yourself to having 10 grand, you're probably doing stuff that other people aren't doing. So you've probably got skills that you don't even realize that you have.
Yeah.
And if you can just double down on them, then you'll have even more. And like James said before, more money, more problems.